did it stop being cool? It's like it still is.
See, you know what's happening right now? My brain is saying one thing, and I'm thinking, do I just come out and say this? And is this going to create a problem saying it?
Don't get me up.
So,
I got college football. I got a lot of shit going on. I'm here. You say it. That's why we're here, Joe. Do not hold back. What's the point of being here if we're going to hold back? Say it.
I got to text in the Mohawk.
It's never, you know what? It's always been not a big part of my life. I mean, it's just, I've been around a lot of people. So I know names and, I still live in Staten Island. So it's like, you hear about something and it's like, oh, okay. Really? He lived down the street from me, and like when you meet people on Staten Island, everybody knows everybody. So you hear all the stories. So I guess it's kind of cool because it brings you back to a time when you were younger, you know what I mean? When you were a kid, it's nostalgic really, but it's not really a big part of my life. It's I know about it.
You know what I mean? Like growing up, I always actually thought it was cool, right? Because I got totally detached from it. And I've been around, so I was in a weird situation. So, although I grew up in Elizabeth, my father had a building down Port, and he had a apartment, underneath the building where he lived. But it was in a really bad area. Port Elizabeth was bad. So I didn't grow up in, Petersburg or Peterstown, kind of hang out in the street, hang out around the Italians. And then in my town, Roosevelt Park, was a lot of Italians, but a lot of Irish and Italian together, right? And other white kids mostly. So with that being said, though, I didn't get direct access, but because I lived in the suburbs and I always, or if I hung in Brooklyn, it'd be like Dr. Heights. The people that you would be around were more like the people that made money and had money because they were in those areas, right? The street guys that were earning nickel and diamond, they were still in the city stuff. But I was always, anybody I knew was administration, believe it or not. Not that I was a big deal. It's just that they migrated, right? You get out of Elizabeth, you move to Edison, you move to in Jersey, you move to Roosevelt Park, you move here, you move there. So my point being was I always thought it was cool. Believe it or not, the more I started interviewing mobsters, the more I started interviewing mobsters, the more off-putting the actual life was. I kind of got off-putted because I realized that I don't know if you could have a normal life, in the mob. Vinny, give me your impression of the mob growing up and how has it formed over the years?
Well, when I was young, I experienced it probably, I thought about it maybe at 11 or 12 because that's where I was and you'd hear stories and who was the tough guy. And by the teens, you got to remember in my teens, I was in the late 70s and that's when, it was like Wild Wild West. Everything was happening. Galenti got killed in 79, all that stuff. Gambino died a couple of years before that. So there was a lot of in-your-face front page news about the mob at that time. And then the 80s come and look at the Wild Wild West, the 80s, the Colombo War, and then you had, Castellano. So you really had a run of 15 years where it was in your face every day. Now you look, there's a little article on page 18. You don't see it. There was something every day about the mob back then. And I grew up seeing these guys with the nice cars and this and that. And you